So many cars, every make, every model, but there's one kind of car you almost never see here in New York, the electric car.
You called this.
The lots are filled with EVs. The consumer does not want them. You know, I don't know whether to laugh or cry because I'm a car dealer.
I was a little nervous about going all EV.
EV adoption really does come down to charging infrastructure when you're on a road trip.
Tesla has slashed prices dramatically, and companies like Ford have ramped up hybrid production.
Would you put your daughter on the highway in an electric vehicle and have her pull over on the side of the road and wait 2 hours to charge her vehicle? I wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it.
So electric vehicle sales, they're declining nationally in America, but they've never really caught on here in New York either. In February, 8.5% of all cars sold in the US were EVs, but in March that had dropped to 7.3%. And in New York City, only 2,100 of the city's registered 2 million vehicles are electric vehicles, which means that only 1% of New Yorkers who own cars bought an electric car, which is strange because New York is one of the most progressive states in the entire country. And according to a survey by Yale University, 60% of New Yorkers worry about climate change. And since buying an EV could potentially reduce one's impact on the climate, you'd expect to see more of them on the road in New York. But in order to understand why 99% of New Yorkers aren't buying EVs, it's important to first learn why Americans are buying less of them.
Charging has been pretty challenging. I stopped at one of the most popular charging sites in the country. It took me about 40 minutes to get 40%. But
that was the CEO of Ford, and he was in the company's brand new Ford F-150 Lightning pickup on a road trip. And his goal was to drive from Silicon Valley to Las Vegas, which was about 530 miles. In a normal car, this should take about 9 hours, but the charging delays he encountered meant that his trip took longer than expected. Now, under perfect conditions, the Lightning would get about 320 miles range, which means he'd have to charge it once, maybe twice.
Ford hiked the starting price on its F-150 Lightning in March of 2023 to $60,000. Ford has since cut that to $49,000.
$50,000 for an F-150. You'd expect it to have zero issues if you paid that much for it, especially since it's supposed to be state-of-the-art. But he had to charge his Ford at a Tesla supercharger, and he got 40% more range in about 40 minutes, which is crazy when you think that that Camry right there can get 100% of its range in about 10 minutes at a gas station. And this happened just a few weeks after a Canadian driver abandoned his F-150 because none of the chargers he found worked. He was on a road trip, he found chargers, but they weren't working. It's new, complicated technology. It's got bugs, they're not all worked out. It's not like the old school gas pump where you just put it in and the gas comes out.
I was a little nervous about going all EV because my husband has an EV as well. I think the main issue is the long distance travel. Being kind of in that situation, you do have to plan.
Yes.
Range anxiety is real with any battery-powered device, no matter how big or small. And it's the #1 reason that stops people from buying an EV. Now, Teslas have better range and more charging options than any other EV maker because they've got their own charging networks all over the country. But it turns out people still don't like the idea that the thing they're driving in might not get them to their destination. Like, you know that feeling when your iPhone's about to die and you have to charge it and nobody has an iPhone charger? Well, this is your car.
Would you put your daughter on the highway in an electric vehicle and have her pull over on the side of the road and wait 2 hours to charge her vehicle when you have no idea who's pulling behind her waiting? I mean, I wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it.
So for a lot of people, there just simply isn't enough support for owning an EV. There's gas stations on every corner, but finding places to charge it, it makes people nervous. And before we get into the things stopping most New Yorkers from buying an EV, we have to talk about cost. Because most EVs cost $10,000 or $12,000 more than a similarly equipped gasoline-powered vehicle. But money can't be the main issue for New Yorkers. After all, the average rent here for an apartment is $5,600 a month, so it can't be that. Plus, New York City geographically is not hundreds of miles in size. And it would be weird for range anxiety to affect people that don't have very far to go. But believe it or not, New York is one of the most impractical places to own an electric vehicle. For several reasons, most of which aren't changing anytime soon. What you're looking at here is the first reason why EVs aren't really taking off here in New York. So let's say this is your car and this is the parking spot you found for it and it's an EV. How do you charge it? Seriously, how do you do it? where's the plug? Car and Driver recommends everybody install a level 2 charger at their house, but if that's your car and that's your house, how exactly are you gonna do that? There's no garage, there's no parking. It's impossible to live in an apartment like this and own an EV and charge it. You'd need a house with a garage, and there's only about 200,000 of those in New York. But there are some luxury buildings that do have EV chargers inside them, but that's rare, and most luxury buildings, including the one I live in that has parking spaces, of which I use one, don't have any EV infrastructure. Plus, it's up to the landlord to put that stuff in. And even if you own a condo in a building like this, you can't just install stuff. You need the neighbor's permission and the condo board's permission, and somebody's got to pay for it. There's a lot of red tape. Also, owning any vehicle in New York is different than it is in the rest of the country. These cars aren't parked here because these are reserved parking spaces. These were empty spots on the street that the drivers happened to find. This one even has a parking ticket. There's no guarantee that you'll be able to park there if you live up in there. And many people who own cars without a dedicated parking spot end up walking several blocks from where they live to where they park. And their parking spot changes every time they drive their car, because as soon as you leave, somebody else is going to take your spot, and now you got to hunt for one all over again. Now, one time I saw a Tesla parked in a spot like that, and there was a cord coming out of the car going into an apartment window. So someone was charging their car from a wall outlet. But wall outlets are the slowest type of charger, and that's not a repeatable process, because again, just because your window's here and your parking spot's here doesn't mean it's going to be like that all the time. But the next reason there's very few EVs in New York is even more interesting. This is one of the few places in New York where you can charge your EV on the street. That's what these cars are doing. They got these big plugs charging them up. And look at that. This vehicle's been charging for 75 hours. Look at that. It also has a City of New York license plate. In fact, these all have City of New York license plates. And of the 6 total charging stations that are here, there is only one that is available for use. This charging station has 1 review and it's 1 star. And it says that city employees sometimes park their gas vehicles here and they don't get in trouble because they're city employees. And this car right here, it's been charging for 148 hours. That is ridiculous. Now look, I'm not trying to shame the city. These are not gasoline vehicles, and electric cars do take a long time to charge. There's just not enough chargers. And New York City's pretty pro-climate. You'd figure that they would be rolling these things out. It's a pretty good design. Doesn't take up that much space. You could get these on sidewalks, no problem. But look at this. There's 1 up here and 1 down here in Manhattan, just a handful of them in the city in total.
In New York, you need a lot of public chargers available to people. And so those are going to be in parking garages. You're also going to have them essentially out on the street. They're looking at doing a lot of curbside charging. But it is an enormous infrastructure build out that they are talking about doing.
So there's basically no public infrastructure like this to charge up your F-150 Lightning. And that means most people who own EVs, if it's not the government, they're people that have access regularly to some sort of private charger like this one on the other side of this fence. But it's up to your landlord or your company to install these, or the parking garage you park at during the week. Car and Driver says that access to charging while the car is parked is the #1 reason people won't buy. And you can see how that's a pretty big issue, especially here in New York. And the good news is that city leaders are aware that this is a problem. They're trying to roll out more of these, but it's proving to be a very slow process.
We're a year in now. The utilization's been huge. So DOT is already talking about targeting 1,000 by 2025.
Did you hear that? 1,000 chargers, but it's going to take a while. And these things are not exactly economical to operate. They use a ton of power all the time. They're expensive to install. And look at all these wires and things. These are going to need regular maintenance, because if they're not working properly, what was the point of putting them in the first place? But since building out street-side charging networks like this one is going to take a long time, it doesn't really look like New Yorkers are going to be able to buy an EV anytime soon and have a reliable way to charge it unless they already have access to a charger somehow. Like, let's say you got an EV. What are you supposed to do? Drive all the way out here and hope that nobody else nabs the 1 remaining charging spot? That doesn't make any sense. We're gonna need more of these, but even though New Yorkers aren't gonna be stocking up on electric cars anytime soon, there's another type of electric vehicle that we are addicted to, and they're everywhere. So I checked. And pretty much every bike over here, except for the illegal unregistered scooters, is an e-bike, not a regular bike. New Yorkers aren't buying electric cars, but they're buying the electric versions of pretty much everything else. And you see those batteries? The city bikes are electric now too.
So why is it these are so popular when electric cars aren't?
Well, let me show you. I happen to have 2 e-bikes in my storage unit. Now, the reason that there's 2 of them is because I ride them both for different purposes. This one right here, it looks like an SUV, weighs as much as an SUV. It's kind of slow, but I use it pretty much for errands. And that big back seat right there will let you carry a passenger. The battery that it comes with is also pretty big. Both bikes have the same capacity battery, and with this one, I only have to charge it 1 to 2 times a month, and it doesn't get ridden more than once or twice a week. But that's because my favorite bike gets all the love. And I've actually been riding around on it today to make this video. I've had to stop at 5 different locations, and I was able to get to all of them pretty quickly. Extremely quickly. Let me show you. Now this thing is essentially a miniature motorcycle. It's got a super bright headlight that you can see from far away, and there's even these rudimentary turn signals and a brake light. Front suspension, rear suspension. It's like having a car, and look at how beat the frame is. You see all those marks right there? My goal is to ride it into the ground, and since last December I've put 2,300 miles on it. Now the Subway costs $132 a month times 12 months. That's $1,600, but you can buy this for $1,900 and it doesn't have delays and maintenance and signal malfunctions. Just change the brake pads and put some air in the tires. Also, since these don't have license plates, when New York City's congestion pricing kicks in and they have the plate readers everywhere, you'll be able to get places without paying the $23 a day toll. $23 a day, 5 days a week. That's $5,600 a year to drive your BMW. But there is a major downside to riding one of these. On a pedal bike, you work up a sweat and your body temperature stays up, but on one of these, you're just sitting there. So in the wintertime, the wind chill is absolutely insane. You have to dress like a World War I fighter pilot to even stand a chance. That's how cold it gets. And the other issue when it gets cold out is ice on the road. What if your bike hits ice? Well, since you're on 2 wheels instead of 4, it's not hard to imagine what's gonna happen. I actually won't ride if it's below freezing, because a spilled coffee on the middle of a street, if you hit that, that could be bad. Plus, when New York salts the roads, you don't want to be riding either. Ugh. But if you have like one of these delivery bikes, which is slower, you could probably ride that all year, no problem. And obviously the range on this isn't what you'd get on like a motorcycle that was the same size and weight, but it'll go about 30 miles, and that's enough to get around New York City. And you don't really have issues with the charging, because at night, you just remove the battery from the bike. Just like an EV, this thing takes a long time to charge. Once it's dead, it needs like 8 hours. But the great thing, again, you just plug it in and you just leave it here. And again, I've got 2 bikes, one of which is always partially charged. So if I had to run an errand, this doesn't inconvenience me too much. The other great thing about these is how easy they are to store. I mean, they just sit down here in the storage room, and they could sit in a corner of your apartment. You don't have to park them on the street, which means they're always where you need them when it's time to leave in the morning. If I need to ride one of these, I just come down here and get it. I don't have to figure out where I parked it, look for an AirTag on my phone. Oh yeah, it's 10 bucks this way. I don't have to do any of that stuff. But why do you think New Yorkers aren't buying EVs? Did I miss anything? Let me know. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.